The last part of Ross's grammar, lessons 41 through 51, are designed to help students become comfortable with the Hebrew text. By seeing Hebrew forms and constructions and contexts, they will be able to review the beginning grammar and also become familiar with the most common elements of the Hebrew text. And by working in the text of the Bible, they'll begin to learn the signs and notes used by scribes and editors. Each lesson then consists of 3 parts. 1. New instruction on grammatical constructions and the use of Biblia Hebraica, Stuttgartensia. 2. Analysis of the reading from the book of Genesis, in which these constructions and notations are found. And 3. Inductive review of the grammatical forms and syntax found in the reading section, with cross-references to full discussions in parts 1 and 2 of the grammar. In the inductive review, some of the forms are parsed to help students review, and some include leading questions about the parsing that give students the opportunity to strengthen their facility with the language. Now, in the online lectures, I am going to introduce at least a few of the things. I'm not sure how useful it is to go word by word, verse by verse, line by line, but I will at least introduce some things in each section. So with this, I go to the beginning of lesson 41, talking about Masoretic notes and the critical apparatus. Notations in the Masoretic text provide helpful information about the context and the use of the Hebrew text. The Masoretes indicated the division of the text into weekly readings by adding abbreviations either in the margin or in the text. So in the margin or in the text, they will sometimes have a marginal samach, which is short for Seder, and it marks each of the Sabbath's readings or orders, Sederim, which provided for the reading through the Torah in the synagogue over a 3-year period. Now, in the electronic copies of the Hebrew Bible that I've asked you to work with, you're probably not going to see this, but if you have a printed copy of Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia or any of the other traditional Hebrew texts, like the one by Letterus, which follows Masoretic tradition, you'll actually see at the beginning of chapter 12 a samach, and that means this is the beginning of a Seder or a new reading for a particular Sunday at the synagogue. So that's the samach in the margin on the side. Sometimes you'll see in the margin a parash, a pei resh shin, which marks one of 54 readings or divisions, parashot, in the Babylonian reading cycle, which covers the Torah in 1 year. So if we scroll down to the text for this chapter in Genesis 1, you also have a parush in the margin, which would be longer than the samach reading. And then sometimes the Masoretes would add a pei into the text, a small pei in the text, Aramaic for petucha, marks the opening of a paragraph division. In other words, this is used to mark where the paragraphs end or begin in the Hebrew Bible. So you don't originally have paragraphs in the Hebrew Bible, but the Masoretes have added kind of little notes indicating where they think the paragraph begins. And so again, if you were reading in Genesis chapter 12, at the very end of verse 9, you see the pay. And that would be the end of that paragraph, and verse 10 would be the beginning of the next paragraph. The Masoretes also added notes to assist in reading and preserving the text. These notes are collectively known as the Masorah. That is, the Masorah represents marginal abbreviations linked to a word in the text by a tiny circle. If more than one of these marks occur on the same line of text, they are matched with marginal comments in the right to left order. So if one were to go to Genesis 12, and again Ross has that in the as a photocopy of the page there in verses 2 and 3, you'll see a little circle here in verse 2. And you'll see a little circle here in verse 3. You'll see a little circle, in verse 2, into verse 2. Another little circle here in verse 3. And then also here, then also here. So what's going on with that? Well, a lot of times it's simply counting how many times a particular form occurs in the Hebrew Bible. And so here, the one with the circle on it at the end of verse 2, Va'agadah, I will make great. That particular form with exactly that spelling is indicated with the letter Lamed, and Lamed is a abbreviation of the Aramaic word for one. And so what this says is that in the entire Hebrew Bible, that exact form with a kamatz hey at the end, which is kind of a coordinative form, with a vav attached, only a vav with a patah, not a vav with a kamatz, only occurs one time in the entire Hebrew Bible. And then the next one, veheye, with a vav with a sagol under it, and a hey with a shavah under it, and a sere under the hey. Well, the second note here is marked with a bet. And bet is an abbreviation for the number 2. It's the second letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and so that would be 2. And then the ML I would have to look up. It's referring to something, but I'm not quite sure what. But then the next two circled words, we have this one, and then you have this one. But then the third one, the ume kalelka, that also has a circle with a lamed indicating that exact form with the vav attached, with the exact vowels, only occurs one time. And then I will curse, also has a lamed and only occurs one time. And what the Masoretes would do, they would go back through a manuscript and they'd go through all the places where a word only occurs one time, and that would be a place where you'd be likely to make a mistake and write a different form. Now, of course, you might have the word or with a vowel letter holem vav, and that would not count, even though it's exactly the same word. Plain A spelling and defective spellings are different words as far as these Masoretic notes are concerned. That's how meticulous they were. They wanted to spell it exactly the way they had received it, whether that's plain A or defective. They were not going to make changes. And the scribes would go back and double check manuscripts. They'd have lists of all these things that they could go back and check to see if the scribe had correctly written the form as prescribed. So to review, 3 out of the 4 words on that line in Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia are marked with a circle that refers you in 3 of those cases to a lamed, which means those forms occur only there in the Hebrew Bible. But then in addition to Masoretic notes, you have the modern scholarly critical apparatus. And in the printed editions of Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia, these are placed at the bottom of the text. And reference to them will be made by marking the word with some sort of a letter in superscript. And some of this will show through in the critical edition that you can get through Logos as well. So here I've gone to the critical edition in Logos, and in Genesis 12 and verse 2, where God says, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great. And then you have a form, veheye, and if you touch on that, it'll actually give you a little bit of critical note, and if you click on it, it can take you to the critical apparatus itself. And there it says that there's a different reading in the Samaritan Pentateuch, which reads instead of ve, you get this form with a vav, a hey, a vav, and a yod. For example, the third word in Genesis 12:3, ume kalelka, is followed by the superscript a, which refers to a footnote at the bottom of the page. So here's the word, third word of chapter 3. And there it has the following critical note. You have an L, which means read, and then a C, which is Latin for cum, which means with. And then you have a symbol for a text in the Chiroganiza, and then PC, which is posse, which is Latin for some, manuscripts, and then it lists, in addition, a symbol representing the Samaritan Pentateuch, a symbol representing the Septuagint, a symbol representing the Syriac translation called the Peshitta, and a symbol representing the Latin Vulgate, all of which read the form as a plural, which means add a yod to the text. So you have a whole series of other manuscripts that read this not the one cursing you singular, but the ones cursing you plural. I will bless the ones blessing you. And the way that the Masoretic text reads, and as far as the one who curses you, I will curse. But it could be plural if those texts represent the original.